Really, starting with boomers, we're really the first entire generations of women to have this extra 20 to 30 years as an entire generation to move into this new life stage in the history of humanity. Regency, those 25 years, is about soul growth. We have an opportunity that no women have had. It's just a remarkable opportunity for women.
Hi, everyone. This is Annalisa with Journey to the Goddess TV, where I regenerate ancient feminine wisdom for modern women. Today, I'm with Dr. A, or as she is known more formally as Dr. Andrea Slominski. A quick bio before we get into the interview. Dr. Andrea Slominski is a cultural mythologist, women's coach, author, and speaker. Dr. A guides and encourages women 45 plus to recreate, renew, and re-embrace their authentic, soulful selves during the tumultuous season of perimenopause, midlife, and menopause. The physical, psychological, and spiritual transformations of this life stage are much easier to navigate with a map of the territory and a compass oriented to your true north. Dr. A created a coaching program that guides women through the 25-year stage of change that frees women to reject society's preconceived notions about who and what they are at this stage of life, empowering women to unlock the potential in their regency years. Yes, I'm so excited for this conversation. Hello.
Hello.
Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. This is awesome. What a great YouTube channel. So honored and happy to be here. Awesome.
Thank you. I had the great pleasure of reading majority of your dissertation, which I know. And everyone I talk to who I interview, who I read their dissertations, they're like, oh my God, I never thought anybody would read it. And I'm like, here you are. I am the one.
I know. There you go. My readership of one, right? There you go.
It was so good. It was so juicy. And I really loved how you opened your dissertation. And I'm going to quote you here. So each act in the drama of human life is a mystery until you have lived through it. Often in the midst of each stage of life, confusion reigns supreme. It is not until you have traveled far enough past the threshold from one stage to another that you can look back and see the crossing clearly. So I just love that. And I thought that would be a really good way to frame our conversation today and kind of open up our discussion.
Awesome. Yeah, for sure. I think as we get older and we go from life stage to life stage and we look back on all the vicissitudes of growing up or whatever, we can look back at adolescence and we can remember how we felt and how we perceived it. And then we see it now from a different perspective and we say, yes, I see now how I went through the hormonal changes, the adolescent maturing of my thoughts and ideations of what life is and who I am and my relationship to my family and my friends and who I'm becoming and who I want to be and what my dreams are. And you look back at that and you see it from a completely different perspective when you've gotten through it. And I think life is like a drama. I mean, my background is theater as a theater director, teacher, and producer. And of course, as we know, myth is the beginning of drama. And so it's just, it's all tied together in the sense of being able to look at the acts of your life and see where you grew, where you changed, where the shifts were, or as Jameson would say, where your daemon or your acorn sort of nudged you towards your destiny. So from my perspective now, being postmenopausal for quite a few years, looking back at that perimenopausal shift, and that's what I was referring to in my dissertation, is looking back at those changes, you see it differently, but of course, then you're also going through the drama of the new stage at the same time. So one hopes that we collect some wisdom from our hindsight as we go forward, but really when you look back at, looking at it through the lens of psychology, depth psychology, looking back at the stages of our development, certainly we can gather all of those archetypes to ourselves and say, oh yes, I understand now more what I was going through in that stage. Hopefully it can shine a light on what you're going through now.
Yeah, I can definitely relate. And I feel like I'm particularly super excited about this conversation because I'm in my late 30s. So I'm slowly, I'm looking, I have my head kind of turned towards what's coming. So I am really looking at filling myself with wisdom of the women who have come before me to help guide me through these stages that are quickly approaching.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting that we're in these different places in our lives, because many women are having children later. Many women are developing their careers first, or their scholarship, or whatever it is they're doing. They're having children later. And it's an interesting dynamic because it's shifting some of the traditional parameters of midlife and of what women should be doing when they're in the peri stage, or when they're almost at menopause, or when they've gone through over that menopausal liminal threshold. And because our lifespan has expanded, which we're going to get to, it's really created some new spaces, and we're living into these new spaces, and there are no models. We're able to create something completely new. And so, yeah, you're looking forward to something where your experience will be completely individual to you. And that's the miracle of all of this, is that every woman's experience is so individual, but at the same time, you're having an individual experience of a universal rite of passage. So it's an interesting dynamic to try to live into and be conscious of.
Yeah, absolutely. My dissertation is on the topic of menstruation and resacralizing menstrual blood. So I talk about a little bit about rites of passage and changing the negative mythologies about menstruation through the culture. But I'm very cognizant too of that individual experience of menstruation that exists at the same time as the kind of universal.
Exactly. Yeah. It's the whole process of women's embodied experience of adulthood, of womanhood, of from the birth of sexuality, the Persephone, right? The Persephone archetype, all the way through to the wise woman, needs to be remythologized, as Christine Downing would say, so that we can experience it in a very deeply personal, sacred, embodied way, as opposed to a shameful, culturally imposed idea of it being a negative or a bad, or somehow tied to women's sinful sexuality. And that's a whole nother patriarchal rabbit hole that we're not probably going to go down. But
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. Or like it's opposite, like what happens when you stop bleeding and what's your value in society, which I think we can segue from there into what you've created, what you've seen, and what you've written about, and what you're teaching other women. I'd love to go into this archetype regency, which you call a new metaphor for women's midlife. And what I found really interesting, and again, which overlaps with my own work, is the biological, psychological, and spiritual piece of this moment, that it's not just biological, it's not just psychological, it's not just spiritual. And of course, there's a lot of other sub points under that too that are affected. And I love that you recognize, like, there's this spaciousness. Something was missing when you were looking at the maiden mother crone. So I'd love if you could talk to me about the regency archetype, how it came up for you and why it matters.
Well, it came up for me in the living of my life, in the experience of my life. And when I was in school at Pacifica, in the first part of the master's PhD program in the master's studies, it became really clear to me that there was something new that was emerging for women. In the work on my dissertation, I really did a lot of work tracing the women's spirituality movement, the goddess religious movement, also the sort of maiden mother crone archetype, the work of Gimbutas, and looking at all of that in terms of trying to revivify the idea of the divine feminine, right? That sort of started really at the same time kind of psychology was born. A lot of the psychology of Freud, of course, and then later Jung, and then the women that followed in his footsteps, or that studied and became analysts, I should say, early in the process. In studying the feminist movement and the idea of reclaiming the divine feminine in culture, in our lives, in our spirituality, in our psyches, and looking at maiden mother crone, it seemed to me like if you were done mothering at, I don't know, some women are done mothering by the time they're 45 if they have their children early. Some women are done mothering at 50. Some are done, raising young children at 60. It just seemed that to say that you're a crone, that you're a wise old woman when you're 50 or when you hit menopause, seemed like a claiming of the title too soon and too young. Mm. And the reason that I felt that was, I was like, well, what's going on here? What's going on with women's life stages? What's going on with women's lifespan? And so I did research into basically looking at women's expected lifespan, the statistics. That's the word I'm searching for in my post-menopause brain. Statistical research, right? And I found that up until the year 1900, most women statistically were dead by 51. Now, of course, there were always old grandmothers, there were always some aunties, there were always some wise women since the time of Plato, right? There have been always women who've lived to a ripe old age, but generations of women basically were dead by 51. Statistically, white women, women of color statistically lived to be like 43. Wow. And I thought, that's really young. And do we really want to claim to be a crone at 50 and then dead at 51? Maybe in that situation when that was as long as you were going to live. But I thought, since 1900, women's lifespan has expanded by 1/3 or more for white women and by double or more for women of color. So now the women's average lifespan is 80, 85 years. So we've now got women hitting menopause. Let's just choose 50 as just a random number, because it makes it easier to talk about. So women are hitting menopause at 50, 51, and then they have another 30 years. So does that mean that you're 30 years of a crone? Or does that mean that women at 50 who are becoming senators, who are starting businesses, who are reinventing their lives, right? Who are through generally with raising their young children, getting them out of the nest, and now have another maybe 20 years of productive, creative, imaginative, contributory time. And I thought, somehow this is a new life stage. And then as I started reading, there were Donna Hennis, who's a ritualist out of New York City, had written on it. Jean Sinead Bolin had written on it. Christine Downing had written on it. I know that Jane Fonda even spoke about it. She made a video, I don't know if it was a TED Talk or a YouTube video. So women had been feeling this, intuiting this, and I'm like, this is really something, this has arrived. By now in like 2020, there is a new life stage that women are living into from say 45, right? When most women have started the perimenopause journey, to say 70. And, for the sake of a dissertation, I had to choose numbers. I had to choose parameters. And as we had said, every woman's experience is different. So from this 45 to 70 period, this new life stage that has completely come on the scene and evolved since 1900, that women who are alive now, boomers, late boomers, millennials, Gen X, we are the first entire generations of women to live past menopause together in the history of humanity. This is huge. By 2027, there will be over 87 million US women, just US women, over 45. So the reason I get really excited about this is, what could regent women do if we worked together? We could change everything. And looking at psyche, at collective unconscious, at the ideas of spiritual evolution, I don't think it's a coincidence that at the time when the planet is in peril from climate change, and the earth herself being one of the original symbolic images of the divine feminine, that all of these problems are coming to the fore with education, with healthcare, you name it, whatever all the issues are, and especially with climate change, that now women have another 20 or 30 years where they can recreate themselves from their first career, from being a stay-at-home mom to starting a business or running for office or doing whatever it is they want to do. Or, some women just want to stay home and garden and take care of their grandchildren, then that's terrific too. But we have an opportunity that no one has ever had. And I called it regency because a lot of scholars and different people in the divine feminine space like to use the word queen. And I get it. It's like a queendom, being queen of yourself. But to me, a queen is waited on, is taken care of, doesn't have to clean the house, doesn't have to balance her checkbook, has no money worries. When I think of queen, I think of royalty that way. A regent is someone who is holding the space or holding the throne and administrating, and they're holding the throne or the seat of power for someone to come. And I believe regent women are holding their own and developing their own seat of power for their own wise woman to come, who eventually then takes the seat of power, psychologically, metaphorically speaking. So there was this new space, this new opportunity, and a regent is someone who can take control of their life, who can make decisions, who can administrate, who can make choices, who can make changes, who can take control of her life to the extent that anyone can. Obviously, none of us can just go write a $1 million check to ourselves and change our lives that way. But in the sense of how you look at your life, on what you decide you want to do with your life, on the opportunity for change, for transformation. And this regent time from 45 to 70 is 25 years from the time you start perimenopause to the time you're fully postmenopause and thinking maybe about being a little less dynamically active in the world, maybe reaping your wisdom, maybe stepping back a little bit and deciding that you maybe want to then move into wise woman. Or some women are going to stay regent and wise woman. Like you have women who are both, like I would say, like a Nancy Pelosi or a Jane Fonda or...
And wise woman is the alternative name that you give to the crone.
The crone, yeah. Well, I use that one because the women that I've worked with and that I talk to, and just in common parlance, crone, despite the fact that so many feminists really tried to reclaim that word and shed it of its pejorative cultural ideation. In the regular world, out there in the world, crone still holds that sort of negative connotation for a lot of women. So I just decided to go with wise woman. Hopefully it's not too much of a betrayal of those who are really in the goddess movement and really looking at reclaiming and all of that work. But I just think that there's so much potential within the mythological perspective of regency and of this time of life, that I'm trying to go out into the field to reach a lot of women rather than necessarily staying within the scholarly ideation of the accepted terminology. And
right.
It has to do, I guess, with my work.
Well, I'm personally a very both and person. So I love that both of those terms can coexist. And I'm going to use the word that makes me feel most empowered.
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's impossible to cast a wide net and make everyone happy.
Exactly.
So I'm a very both and person too. It's like everybody's on their own journey. Every woman goes through all of these embodied experiences from menses to post-menopause in such a personal and individual way that it's impossible to say you must do it this way, or you must do it, or you must use these words or those words or whatever.
Exactly. You touched on this point around women's life expectancy. And I want to go back to that for a minute because I personally find this really fascinating. And I think it's really worth emphasizing again that I think you had said that most women prior to 1900 didn't live that long past their menopausal years. And there's another point that I find fascinating that you brought up in your dissertation, and that is the question around why are we one of the only species that can live past menopause, right? And I remember reading an article a few years ago about, I think it was killer whales. I don't think it's all whales.
Yeah, it's killer whales. Yep.
Killer whales, right? They're one of the species in which their females live past menopause, well past menopause.
And they lead the pod.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's there's the grandmother theory around that, correct?
Yes. Yep. Yeah.
So it seems to me that there is a very important reason, probably as you've touched on, that's kind of beyond the scientific things that we've created that have allowed women to live longer. There seems like there's a very important biological function, ancestral function, collective reason why
wisdom function
why we are able to do that, and why now so many women en masse are living such lengthy lives.
I would call it the physical following the spiritual evolution, in a sense. I really think that when you look at the history of patriarchal cultural influence, and we're talking about now, as you know, looking at, thousands and thousands of years of human history, basically when we flipped from matriarchal or matrilineal construction of cultures in the Neolithic and the stages that came right after that, the patriarchal construct really ordered society in a way that conscripted women's spiritual identity, women's divinity, women's place in the culture. And so then, of course, we have I think there's maybe 2 matrilineal cultures that are still, 2 or 3 possibly, that are still alive and viable today. So we've come through patriarchy from all of these years, and the feminine attributes that we're talking about archetypally, right? In terms of Jungian psychology and the collective unconscious and these types of big concepts include creativity, nurturance, empathy, compassion, conservatorship, all of these types of attributes that have to do with maintaining or benefiting the collective, as opposed to sort of a more patriarchal or capitalist, or shall I get political? Capitalist or
top down, power over.
Yeah, exactly. Top down, power over way of thinking in terms of profit, in terms of individual, in terms of family unit, and not in terms of, say, of the collective. Nation is another one, right? The idea of nation. So looking at the resurgence of the idea of the divine feminine is the resurgence of the idea of all of these connective, what would be, I think, considered creative aspects of the human psyche. And that's not to say it's only women, that each psyche, each person has their feminine attributes and their masculine attributes. We all have both within us. And so the idea of taking care of the planet, waking up and saying, oh, we really shouldn't do this anymore, because in killing the planet, we're killing ourselves. Looking at ecological thinking, the idea that we are not above life on Earth, we are a part of life on Earth, and we have to find a way to live in harmony, right, with the natural world if we're going to learn to live in harmony with the planet. So the idea of taking care of each other, taking care of the planet, having empathy and compassion for those who are starving, for those who are at war, for those who have less, for those who are in poverty, for those who are sick, for whatever it is. All of the idea of the resurgence of those feminine principles is happening at the same time, or did happen, the resurgence of it is happening at the same time that women's lives are getting longer. And women's lives are getting longer. Not only are we just we're not like hitting 50 and being so old that we're all being put in the old folks home in a rocking chair. We're living longer, we're recreating ourselves, and we're becoming dynamic change makers, right? Even if it's only in contributing to the collective consciousness in the way that we think about life and community, right? And the collective. Or if we go out, like so many women did in the 2016 midterms, and run for office and get elected, or whatever it is, start nonprofits, have a new business, whatever. So the extension of the lifespan gives women an opportunity to get out of the householder years, right? Which are crazy busy, crazy. It doesn't matter. whether you have children, whether you don't have children, right? You're going to have a job or a career. You can mother many things, right? You can mother your friends, you can mother your older parents, you can mother your siblings, you can mother your job, you can mother your relationships, whatever it is. In those years of young adult up through the 30s and 40s, if you're having children, if you have a career, if you have one or the other or both, those years are so, so busy. And those are the going out and establishing and becoming like who you are and what you're interested in and finding out really in the living of your life every day what your values are and what's important to you. And so as we get to the beginning of the physical transformation of perimenopause, and our hormones begin to shift, our thoughts begin to shift. And the thing that is so interesting is, to me, is that this is all designed to be this way. This is all pre-programmed, right? The physical shift, the psychological shift, and the spiritual shift are all pre-programmed to happen in this 25-year period from 45 to 75. You will change as much from 45 to 75 as you did from the day you were born to the day you were 25. There's as much change that goes on in the way you look at yourself, in the way you look at the world, in how you are making meaning in your life, what the mythologies or the stories are that lead you forward into this next stage. So from householder to regent, and many women oftentimes end up having a foot in each world, because if they have children late, right, they could be going through perimenopause, right, when their kid is in 8th grade.
I was going to ask you about this. I was going to ask you because I see this as my future.
So, you know, and that's a real both and. That is living, that is really living in the tension. That is really learning to live in the tension between, right, the householder years and between the biology and the psychology that are starting to shift you into your regency period. And so the biological and psychological shift that's pre-programmed into women is one that turns you to look back inside after you've spent so many years tending everyone else's garden, right? It turns your thoughts back to your own, and you begin to look at yourself and who you are and what you want and what is coming next, right?
Right.
And so all of this shift and the midlife reassessment of meaning and of relationships and values and all of those things also happens at the same time. And, you know, the first 25 years we're basically focused on, and our culture is focused on the physical milestones. It's all about physical growth. It's all about growing up and becoming a toddler, and then you become a young child, and then you go to school, and then you become an adolescent, and then you become an adult, and it's all physical markers. Well, if the first 25 years is all about physical growth, right? Regency, those 25 years is about soul growth.
Oh, I love it.
And so it's just a remarkable opportunity for women.
I think it's worth bringing in too right now that obviously in our culture pathologizes menopause. I mean, so most of women's bodily functions are pathologized, but like, you know, there's so much, you know, pejorative thinking and shaming around this time. And so everything that you've just said is about, you know, changing that narrative, reorienting how, you know, you can approach it as a deep spiritual journey.
Absolutely. And menopause itself, everybody talks about menopause. Menopause is a moment. Menopause is a threshold. Perimenopause is where everything happens. It's where all the action is, right?
Okay.
And then post-menopause too. But menopause itself is the day that you have gone 1 year without menstruating and you never menstruate again. That day is menopause. Right?
Wow, we need like a big ritual for that day.
Yes. I've actually, some of my clients, we've done big menopause parties and rituals for when they've actually, you know, made it the 1 year. And so there's sometimes it's funny, like somebody will go a year and then at 14 months they'll have a period, right?
Yeah.
And so then they have to count a whole nother year.
Wow.
So it's when it's been a year since you've menstruated, and this is of course the medical definition, right? And you never menstruate again. That is the threshold, that is that liminal space that you just walk from one side over to the other. And there you are.
I wonder if regency would have a different definition.
I think regency to me is a process, you know. I think when the change starts, right? When the perimenopause changes start, I think you're sort of entering that regent space. And I think it's very much like the wise woman. I think you sort of self-proclaim it. In householder, you're a young adult, you graduate college or you graduate from high school and you get your first jobs or whatever, and you go out and you get your own place and you're finally, you know, living with friends, or you have a partner or by yourself or whatever it is, and you establish your first household, your own house, your own space, your own routine, your career, your friendships, your interests, whatever it is. And so those householder years, it's kind of like when you first establish independently, right?
Yeah.
That I would say is that threshold into your householder years. But regency, I think it's maybe a little bit harder to define because of the way the perimenopause shift begins and the way the midlife shift begins. And the perimenopause and midlife shift are woven together like threads in a tapestry. When you pull on one, it snags the other. And a lot of the problem in our culture and in medicine is that the only thing that people think about, or they think about treating, or they think about addressing is the physical. And the physical, the psychological, and the spiritual are so intertwined. You can, in this transition period, you can't separate them. You have to look at the whole woman, the whole embodied experience, right? So regency, choosing 45 as a general number, as I was forced to do, is a transition period where I think women eventually will internally can claim their regency. They can say, okay, I'm in a period of change. I'm going to learn as much as I can about it. I'm going to participate in it. I'm not going to put on a roller coaster that I'm completely out of control of, you know. I'm going to learn, I'm going to understand, I'm going to work on myself and on understanding this transition, specifically where I am and where I want to go.
Right. And not just from the biological perspective.
Yes, no, not at all. The biological is a really big piece of it. But
Right.
the biological influences the psychological so strongly, like through the hormonal changes, and that you can't separate them. You just can't. If you can, it's like fire needs what? It needs fuel and it needs air.
Right.
So if you take the fuel away, you have no fire. If you take the air away, you have no fire. You can't have one without the other. They're
Right.
just.
Yeah. I mean, that was my whole thing with menstruation too. And like, how much does the psyche affect the biology and vice versa? Right. How much do my thoughts and my feelings about myself?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
The power of shame or fear or embarrassment or self-abasement, you know, in terms of feeling disgusted or feeling, you know, grossed out or whatever it is, depending on how you're raised and how you look at it and how you understand what's going on. I mean, women's relationship with their body, but I mean, oh, come on. This has just been such a terrible, terrible result of patriarchal repression of women's sexuality and women's understanding and owning of their body and their body functions and everything from the medical, from the women's wandering womb, you know, from the 1800s, you know, where the whole problem was because your womb was wandering around your body, to the fact that even still today, many medical studies don't include women.
Right,
So
exactly.
we're really fighting an uphill battle to overcome our body shame and our body function shame and the cultural shame around it. You know, we've been shooted all over for thousands of years, much less the last 50 years, what you should look like, what you should wear, what you should eat, you should shave, you should this, you should that, you know, you should look younger, you should dye your hair, you should get plastic surgery, you should.
Yeah. So it's like this regency, this expansive moment is an opportunity to, I guess, put those narratives on their head.
Yes, exactly. And to reclaim this new stage of life for you. You reclaim it for you. You come out of the household of years, tending all these other gardens, right? And your psyche and biology beg you to look inside, right? And to look at who you are and what you want and what your needs are and what you have to offer and where you are in the collective and what your meaning is and to relook at all of these things and reclaim your life for yourself in this stage, because it's a gift. It's a gift that no other women have ever had.
Every time you say that, I get shivers. It's so profound. It's so meaningful.
We have to make it so, right? Every individual has to make it so. And that's the beauty of it, is in the greatest unity is made up of the broadest plurality, right? So the more we have individuation, individuals, the idea of the multicolors of the rainbow, without one of the colors, it's not the rainbow, right? And the idea that, having 87 million women, right, awake and aware and saying no more. No more are women going to be seen this way, treated this way, whatever it is that they're overcoming, and looking at positive ways to move forward, not just for ourselves, but for humanity. I mean, going back to the whales, right? The grandmother leads the pod because she knows historically where they migrate to find the fish in the seasons, right? She has the map. She has the compass, and she's teaching. So that's a great example from nature.
Right. Like we have something to learn from those whales who value the grandmothers.
Yes, absolutely. And then looking forward to the wise women, getting to that point where we self-designate, that we now want to be the wise women or whatever it is we want to do. Okay. And so then what can we do then? What can we share? What can we facilitate in terms of healing, in terms of spiritual growth, right? Individually, within the family, within the community, within the nation, within the world.
Right.
And it's all connected.
I want to know how you work with women.
I do a number of different things in the coaching work that I do. And I'm also working right now on putting together a group coaching program that I'm launching after the first of the year. On the one-on-one coaching, what I do with women is we look at three things in terms of establishing who we are and where we want to go, right? In terms of being in regency, the midlife shift makes you sort of wake up one day and go, who are you people? Who am I? What am I doing? My life felt like it fit yesterday. Today, it doesn't feel like it fits. I feel like my marriage isn't working. I don't want to be here anymore. All this reassessment of career, of life, of relationships, of everything. So whatever it is that a woman is struggling with, whether it's the physical or psychological or the spiritual, we start by saying, okay, where are we now? And I look at my work with women is always done through a mythological and depth psychological lens, my coaching. And so we say, okay, well, where are you now? And we try to identify what's going on. What's going on now in your life? Like what's going on that's good, what's going on that's not so good, what brought you to me, what are you looking for answers for, what's troubling you? Let's kind of identify where you are. And so the whole construct of my whole methodology is based on the idea of constructing a map, right? And helping you find your internal compass so that you can orient to your true north, right? To your passion, whatever that is that's either always has been, is reemerging, or something new that's growing and is completely different than anything you've ever done. So we do that. Then we say, okay, well, now that we're here, the metaphor that I use is, okay, you're in the household of years and you're hiking up a mountain, right? It's like hiking up a mountain. You're raising kids, you're doing your career, you're building a business, whatever it is you're doing. You're hiking up the mountain and you're in the forest. And for the most part, you're looking down because you don't want to trip over the rocks or the tree roots or whatever. And you're following, there's a trail and you're following the trail. And all of a sudden you get to like the beginning of regency, right? Or midlife or whatever you want to call it. And you get to the top of the trail and you take the next step and all of a sudden you're out in the bright sunshine in the middle of a high mountain meadow, like on the top of a mountain. And it's like, oh my God, you come out of the forest, it's really bright, you get the light of self-realization is like blinding you and you're standing there and the trail disappears. And you're like, okay, what now, right? So you've got all the stuff you're carrying with you, you put your pack down. And I say, okay, so that's where you are now. So we talk about all those things. Where are you now? You're at the top of the midlife mountain. You've climbed this mountain. You've gotten this far, whatever's going on in your life. All right. So now that we're here, let's take a look back and see where we've come from. So we look back, and metaphorically, you can look back down the mountain and you can see the trail and you can follow it back to, and you can see all its twists and turns. And you can follow it back to, how you've gotten there, and you can see how certain choices that you made and certain things that you did in your life. And as Hillman. I love Hillman. His, your daemon might have pushed you one way or the other towards your destiny. We've made all these choices. And so here you are. Okay, so now we understand how we got here. We understand where we are and how we got here. Okay, so now where do you want to go? When you turn around in the meadow and you look the other way, what do you see? Do you see oceans, mountains, deserts, metaphor? So then we figure out what they want to do. And so the basic order of things in the way that I work with people to discover their personal myth, which is their story about where they've come from, where they are, and where they want to go, right? It's generally accomplished in about 12 weeks for the initial work and the initial program. And then people come in for, tune-ups or for touch bases. Ideally, what happens is when we look back at things, when we look at where we are and we look forward, I use the metaphors of the experience of women in mythology from all over the world to crack open the experience that women have had and to give them the understanding that oftentimes what happens is when women are looking for coaching, they feel like they're broken. They feel like there's something wrong with them. They feel like they're alone in their experience and they feel isolated, right? They don't understand what's going on. When you work from a mythological construct and you use these ancient myths and fairy tales and folk tales to relate to what their experience has been or is, or what they're looking to do, it makes you realize, and I know you know this from your work, it helps you realize that you are not alone, that in fact, you're part of a greater story, that you're part of this huge tale, this huge mythological tale, this huge experience of women living. And what you're experiencing is not out of the ordinary. You're not broken. You're not alone. You're experiencing something that women have had to deal with and that women have lived through, survived and thrived and made different choices for millennia. And so by using a metaphorical overlay to the coaching, it's so creative in terms of being able to envision yourself as part of a greater story or envision what your next chapter might be, what your next part of your journey might be. It takes away all of the negative self-imaging, right? It takes away all of the idea of guilt and blame and for the choices that we've made, the things that we've done, the life that we've lived. It allows us to see from above. You're able to see your life like the chapters in a fantastic story, right? And when you can see the chapters in a metaphorical or a universal sense, you're able to remove yourself in some ways from a lot of the negativity that you may have wrapped up around certain aspects of your life. So it kind of can free you to then say, okay, I see this, I understand this, I know where I am, I know how I got here. I'm not alone, I'm not broken, I'm not deficient, I'm not sick, necessarily. I'm going through a huge transformation. And when you really understand that physically what happens to you in the perimenopause space, psychologically what happens to you, and spiritually what happens to you, if you engage in the process, that it's a 25-year transformation. And as I said before, you'll go through as much change in this 25 years as you did in your first 25 years. You can give yourself a little grace, right? You can realize you don't have to solve it all today, right? That you're not going to feel the way you feel now necessarily in 5 years. It's that same, but what we started with, the drama of the act that you're going through, participating in it, trying to understand it, influence it, direct it positively, is going to give you a sort of empowered way to be in the change, because you can't change it. If you live long enough, you will go through this stage, no matter what you call it, unless you're completely asleep psychologically, unless you're completely unconscious. You'll go through it. So you can either go through it in a sense, kicking and screaming,
Resisting,
or you can go through it kicking and screaming, participating and influencing it.
What I'm feeling is that it's alleviating some of the fear around this process, right? Some of the fear and
maybe some of the anxiety, right?
Yeah.
Some of the guilt, right? Women feel guilty about getting old.
Yeah.
They feel shame.
I know.
They feel shame. They feel shame about about their bodies, about their faces, about their hair. Imagine what it would be like if women loved their bodies.
I know. I was just telling a friend yesterday, I could have written my dissertation on women's body hair, the shame we feel from our body hair.
Yeah, exactly. Especially in the global north. Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel too, you're also helping women embrace some of the rejected feminine values, like trusting your body, for example, trusting the process and trusting your body. Patriarchy is totally scared of both of those things. They don't want us to trust our bodies
or enjoy our bodies.
or enjoy. That's right. And also like this connection to the past and like the lineage of, women and women's experiences. Again, that's also really suppressed in our culture.
Absolutely. Every one of us is the daughter of a mother who was the daughter of a mother who was the daughter of a mother. We are part of that lineage back to mitochondrial Eve. The embodied experience of living life as a woman is completely different than the male experience.
And we live in a culture that, yes, it pathologizes and it differentiates women from men, but it also idealizes the male body as the normative standard human body.
Yes. Yes. Well, of course, men get sexy as they get older and women get ugly.
Right.
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 During the pandemic, I offered low cost or free workshops on basically mythological principles to help us through the idea of what we were living through, taking the mythological perspective of Demeter searching for Persephone. I don't know, I think I did like 30 or 40 of them. So just trying to offer hopeful perspectives, thoughtful perspectives on what we were doing. It was really a wonderful experience to be able to reach out and support as many women as I was able to. I also did a number of mini journals that I put out in digital format that you could, download and type into or whatever, so that women could just take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, just sit down and really sit and think about what are you experiencing? What is happening? I think the thing that really motivated me to continue to do a lot of this work during the COVID experience was that so many people were so exhausted. Everybody was at home initially doing nothing but suffering from mental and psychological exhaustion and all the different things. What was to be able to say to everyone, what you're experiencing is so normal. And the fact that you didn't learn to speak 3 new languages and play the piano and get a master's degree, all during this year because you didn't go to work, it is completely normal. And the idea that, talking about the idea of what happens in the brain when you're living under what's constant fear of death, constant anxiety and fear of death, and how the amygdala and the whole adrenaline system and burnout and what that does to your psyche, what that does to women's hormonal cascade with the cortisol response, everything. And just in terms of being able to educate women and say, you're okay. You're okay. What you're experiencing is not abnormal. What you need to do is make sure this, that, the other thing, not prescriptive in the sense of medical, but just in the sense of self-care and realizing that everyone has limits. And then, of course, being able to use myth and mythological constructs and fairy tale and folk tale. And like I said before, to crack them open and to show people that we are not the only people who have lived through terrible, terrible times historically, and that we can get through it. And also looking at myths, this is my favorite thing. I'm going to make a t-shirt with this on it someday. That myths show us that even goddesses suffer.
Yes. I would love that t-shirt. Even goddesses
suffer.
Hashtag even goddesses suffer. Yes.
And that we too can survive and be victorious to whatever degree, in terms of victorious meaning be able to go on and live a creative and meaningful life.
Yes.
Within and outside of the things that are happening. And especially like in the very beginning with all the social unrest, everything that's going on, there was a lot of fear. There was a lot of anxiety. And I kept repeating, we're not the only ones who've lived through times like this. Let's look back, let's look at these ancient stories and see what we can find in them. Really, the heroine and the captive are the two sides of the same coin for the archetype, right?
Interesting. Yeah.
Is it heroic to get up every morning and to continue and to live on and to wear the mask and to be careful? Yes, it is heroic, but at the same time, are you the captive? Because it's like, yes. And trying to educate people that often life is about living in the tension. It's about being able to balance the pull between whatever's going on, and being able to acknowledge both. And as you said earlier, that we're living in this difficult space. So it was really a wonderful opportunity to be able to offer a different perspective to women maybe who hadn't been exposed to it. For me, I'm just very excited about the potential for women within this regency period, and who they can become, and what they can do. And it doesn't matter to me what their choice is. I'm not telling people what they should or shouldn't do, but that they should take advantage. They should dive into this new life stage and really understand the gift that it is and do something, whatever. And hopefully, my greatest hope is that somehow it will benefit the collective.
Is there any parting wisdom about your work or about Regency that you'd like to impart?
Just to remember to give yourself grace, that it's a 25-year transformation of change, right? In your body, in your perspective, in your psyche, in your meaning-making function, in your spirit, in your goals, in your dreams, and your aspirations. And so give yourself some grace in that going through that time is going to take some time. Going through those changes is going to take some time. And that there are resources for you. If your physical indicators as you're going through perimenopause towards the menopause shift are debilitating, get help. Find someone who can help you with that. If what's going on psychologically is debilitating, get help. Spiritually, it's the same thing. And just realize that it's all pre-programmed. No one I know looks back at adolescence and thinks, what a great time. Right?
Yeah.
I loved it. I loved the zits, and I loved this, and I loved that. And I loved my crazy emotions, and I loved whatever it was. Whatever, right? Nobody looks back at that and says, what a great time, right? But participate in it, right? If you participate in the changes that are going on, right? If you engage in them, then you're going to realize that you're not broken, you're not alone, and you're not deficient, that you're going through a transformation that is profound. The seed, when it is planted and it sprouts, the seed is completely consumed, cracked open, and destroyed by the new life that comes out of it, right? The egg and all of the nutrients in there, right, is completely consumed by the chick that comes out of it. And yes, this is the best one, the butterfly, right? The caterpillar goes into the chrysalis, and the caterpillar is completely consumed by the process that then turns into the butterfly.
Yeah.
No new life emerges until it first passes through darkness. No new life. So just remember that, in your darkest days, in your hardest times, in the most difficult of the situations, right? You're transforming, and the seed is cracking, or the caterpillar is being consumed, whatever it is.
You will emerge.
Yes. You will emerge. Take advantage of your Regency years. Do it for you. Claim them for you.
Love it. Thank you so much for being here. It's been so much fun.
This has been awesome. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share my ideas.
Do you want to share with the audience how they can find out more about you and your work?
Absolutely. You can go to my website, which is www.drandreaslominski.com, drandreaslominski.com. Or you can find me on Facebook and also on Instagram. And then, as I had said before, coming up, this is the end of 2021 when we are talking. So coming up in the beginning of 2022, I'm going to be launching a group coaching program, which will be based on the 7 realms of change that women go through during this 25-year period, and the goddesses that rule those realms, and how we can basically cross those 7 realms quite positively. Obviously, always doing the one-on-one coaching. So you can always reach out to me for that. On my website, there's a scheduler if you want to talk about what's going on and see if we're a good fit. You can always schedule a consultation. So I'm always available for that. And I think I've got like a year or two's worth of blogs on my website if you want to read a little bit more about things that I've done.
Yeah, your website's very full. I love it. There's a lot of stuff to look at on there.
And then I think I put a couple of things up on my YouTube channel. So hopefully I'll be doing some more of that. But there's some stuff on my YouTube channel. You can find that too. So
Great. And I'll leave links to your website and all of those other sites that you mentioned. And I'll also have a reference section at the end of the text box here. So the people that we've talked about in this discussion audience, you can find them.
Right.
So I'm going to say thank you again.
I should say it's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It was awesome.
Yes. And thank you, everybody. If you liked this video, please hit like. Please subscribe to the channel. Please leave a comment. We will do our best to respond to your comments. I will pass them on to Andrea, Dr. A. And if you like what you're seeing here on this channel, please head on over to my Patreon page and consider becoming a member, where you have lots of access to behind the scenes footage and other goodies like that. So thank you, everybody. And until next time, ciao.
Ciao. Namaste, everyone.